Assalamu alaikum. You're tuned into the Mental Health and Wellbeing Show with your host Atiyah on Ramadan Radio 87.9 FM. You can also listen to us online on ramadanradiowolves.com. In the previous session, we focused on depression and perinatal, maternity and pregnancy depression. You can listen back to this and other shows through subscribing and listening in to our YouTube channel. Those of you who listened in may recall that we would be leaving DVDs about depression in Urdu at the Pak Continental store. They will be available to collect from today, so please help yourself to these. In the show today, we will be discussing two main topics: obsessive compulsive disorder and autism from the lens of carers. We hope to provide information that may be helpful to support our well-being and the well-being of others. Our life and the world around us has changed rapidly within the last 6 months, with a lot of focus on hygiene, keeping ourselves clean and away from others, with the hope to reduce our chances of contracting the coronavirus. We find at times like this it becomes easy to worry about the current situation and how we can protect our families, friends and the wider community. It's natural to think about worst case scenarios. In this current climate, however, it is also necessary for us to be able to find a balance, so that we can sometimes worry to instigate necessary action, and at other times to be able to park the worry and continue with our daily activities. Continue with, for example, focusing on working from home, increasing in piety, or spending quality time with our family. Now, worry becomes a problem when it becomes regular and overwhelming. This anxiety may contribute to individuals experiencing symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder, otherwise known as OCD. How do we recognize the difference between normal cleanliness and when it's moving towards symptoms of OCD? In an attempt to understand this, I would like to welcome our guest, consultant psychiatrist, Dr. Safi Afghan, to discuss this further. Dr. Afghan, Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you for joining us today. We'd like to focus on symptoms that may arise due to the current public health crisis. Now, OCD may remain hidden for years within families. Some families thinking that someone is just tidy, super clean or organised. How can people tell the difference between normal cleanliness and OCD? And you might want to bring in what the symptoms of OCD are here too.
Okay, yes, thanks. I think we, in ordinary language, in day-to-day, we do use the word obsessive. Sometimes people are interested in certain things. That is, we say he's an obsessive football fan, or ladies, they're obsessive about shoes, etc. But that's not OCD.
Mm-hmm.
That's, their interest in things.
Mm-hmm.
They sometimes have more, they spend more time enjoying their interest in things. But some people, when they have distressing thoughts that come into their mind again and again, or experience urges to do the same thing again and again. This type of phenomena can come to dominate one's life and stop them from enjoying things and even stop them from doing things that they need to do. Then it is possible, that's likely to be a part of OCD. Right. So if I will summarize it, if somebody gets awful thoughts coming into their mind, even though they struggle to keep them out, or they have compulsion or tendency to touch or count things or repeat the same action like washing over and over again, this is most likely to be part of OCD. Now, OCD is present in about 1 in 50 people, and is equally common in men and women.
Right.
And in the context of current COVID climate, as we know, we are asked to hand wash repeatedly and to make sure we are clean, and it is likely to affect people who have who suffer from OCD and have obsessive thoughts about contamination or cleanliness. And so sometimes in some OCD patients, commonly they do hand washing compulsively. So it's possible that it may increase that tendency in those patients, or those who are undergoing treatment for OCD, for example, and they're trying to reduce their hand washing activity, and equally there might be impact on them. Yeah.
So, what are the symptoms of OCD? You've talked there about kind of cleanliness. Are there other
Yes,
symptoms?
that's right. I think that generally there are two key symptoms OCD has. As the name stands, O stands for obsessions and C stands for compulsions. Now, obsessions are the thoughts, repeated intrusive thoughts that make you anxious. And these thoughts are usually quite unpleasant, as I said earlier. They could be short phrases or rhymes, or they could be doubts. They could be ruminations and things like that. These obsessions are associated with anxious emotions as well. So, and then the other key symptoms in OCD are compulsions, that the things you do to reduce your anxiety. And I will give you an example for that. Say, for example, if somebody has a obsession that they have got hands are contaminated, then they would obviously wash it repeatedly. Or if somebody has a doubt that the door is unlocked, still at night time they have locked the doors, they still have a doubt, obsession doubt that they haven't locked the door, so they will repeatedly go and check the door. And there are similar, actions, rituals. For example, in people who pray, sometimes they doubt whether they have done the right salat, so they repeatedly, redo the salat and things like that. So these are the common symptoms, and OCD symptoms can range from being mild, where people can get along with their day-to-day functioning and their interpersonal relationships, to extreme forms where it affects their relationships, it affects their working lives, it affects their efficiency and their performance. So it can be, for mild cases, can be easily managed through simple interventions, but in severe cases, they need support from mental health services, like psychiatric services.
Yeah. So my understanding from what you've said, as well as my own learning, is that for people who have OCD symptoms, they check things repeatedly. They worry about contamination or thinking that there is contamination. Some focus on symmetry and ordering. Some ruminate a lot, which is what you mentioned, where they're overthinking and having regular intrusive thoughts. And for some people, it can include hoarding, uncontrollably collecting and storing things. Is that correct?
Sure. No, that's correct. That could be also one of the common compulsion that, they, as we know, some people hoard useless and worn-out possessions. And it's a thinking is that you can't throw anything away. So they just don't want to do that.
Yeah. So they want to keep items.
That's right.
Okay. And sometimes that affects the house, and people fill their houses with lots of things that are unnecessary and not needed, and it affects the family wider. But coming back to the topic at hand, which we're focusing on more so, which is the obsession around cleanliness and keeping clean. Now, psychological support like cognitive behaviour therapy, CBT, are recommended for people with mild to moderate symptoms of OCD. And you mentioned there that with severe symptoms, there is psychiatric support available, and I'm assuming alongside psychological support as well. What kind of psychiatric support is available for people who present with severe and enduring OCD?
Sure. As you've already mentioned, and I would just reinforce that for moderate degree of OCD, cognitive behavioral therapy and related, other therapy, which we call
Yes.
exposure and response prevention,
Mm-hmm.
they are effective. But also equally effective is use of SSRI, which is antidepressant medication.
Mm-hmm.
They're also called SSRIs, and they are recommended, and they help to about 60% of patients
Right.
if they are used in proper doses. However, as you said, the severe cases of OCD require more than primary care or more than just psychological interventions.
Mm-hmm.
They may need specialist psychiatric services.
Mm-hmm.
So they might need more extensive, they might need combination of medications,
Mm-hmm.
which include antidepressants and other psychiatric medicines, and also sometimes more extensive psychological therapies like cognitive behavior therapies, extended to help them with, and also, they might need some distraction techniques, some social interventions so that they can distract themselves positively.
Mm-hmm. And in worst case scenarios, do people get hospitalized for OCD symptoms?
Well, that's a very good question. I must say here that OCD does present on its own, but sometimes OCD
Mm-hmm.
can also be associated with depressive disorder. We discussed depression last week,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes people with OCD. It's very rare that OCD patients need hospitalization,
Mm-hmm.
but if they have got associated depressive disorder, and with that they are, if they have got thoughts, risks of self-harm, suicidal
Mm-hmm.
thinking, or if they are not eating and drinking, and they are significantly interfering with their quality of life, then sometimes they may need hospital admission.
Right. So, for the most, you're saying that actually psychological therapies, exposure response therapy included, and psychiatric medication is helpful in the first instance.
That's right.
Okay.
That's
So,
right.
now, if someone had a hand washing obsession, let's say prior to COVID-19, how could this
Yeah.
public health crisis further affect this problem for them?
Yeah. It's again a very important thing, a question for which various OCD-related forums have issued guidance, and I would like to mention three main suggestions here, which I have been familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
One, because people with OCD, and we know we are all as public health, as citizens, we are more likely to watch media and find out what's happening about COVID, how many people are affected, or sadly how many people have died. Now it's likely that OCD patients are likely to be more vulnerable to watch and be tuned to the media. And I think one of the things, so there's a compulsion to watch media to know what's happening. And one suggestion is that there should be they should put some self-restriction in watching the media, so that it reduces their obsessional fears or their compulsions, and they could restrict it to maybe once a day or limited time. So that is one. The other thing is, if they are likely to feel that they are, say for example, they are washing their hands more, or they are doing more washing or cleanliness. So the one of the suggestion is that they should be compassionate towards themselves, and they should accept the fact that what is what they are experiencing is everybody else is experiencing the same, but they should follow the national guidance on what has been recommended. So there will be a scenario whereby a patient with OCD who is receiving, for example, CBT, and they are trying to cut down on their hand washing, they should actually at this pandemic situation, they should suspend that, and I think they should follow what the national guidance is. And if that means they are expected to wash, say, for 20 seconds and as often as necessary, then they should follow that advice. And hopefully once this pandemic is over, then they should restart that therapy-based, approach. And the third thing is, people with OCD are most likely to, because of the lockdown, and they're most likely, it might increase their anxiety levels and fears. So they should try to connect, they should try to use other ways of communication to network with their friends and family with the view of getting support. Or they should also access any online support from the OCD support groups that are working locally or nationally.
Yeah, and some of them who are receiving therapy will probably have the opportunity to still access that via online means. I know within my field we're working online and seeing therapists via video calls.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I'm thinking of, you've talked a little bit there about people who might have had previous symptoms and how it could get worse because of the current situation. But I'm also thinking about some of us who don't have OCD. There is a big focus and push on hand washing and cleanliness and don't touch your face, etc. All relevant guidelines. It's being encouraged on a regular basis as a preventative. What if we begin to develop symptoms, or we notice that a loved one's developing symptoms? I mean, how can we notice that, and what can we do to prevent it getting worse?
Yes, I personally think, in my professional opinion, that it's unlikely that people who are not vulnerable or don't have previous OCD are unlikely to develop a full-fledged OCD-like condition. I think they might. I think there should be acceptance that this pandemic has caused anxiety among large proportion or large segments of population. And there are various other reasons why people are feeling anxious about it. It's the lockdown, it's the restriction in social mobility. But so this anxiety, one should accept that it's natural to be anxious. It's natural to be little concerned about this. So again, the same thing, that one should be compassionate about. The family members should accept it, and this is likely to hopefully disappear once the pandemic is over. It's unlikely that people who don't have, who are not vulnerable or who are not likely to develop OCD, I think they may have developed some compulsive washing, but it's unlikely to sustain for long enough. And I don't think they should worry about developing OCD.
Dr. Afghan, thank you for all of that information. I do want to encourage listeners. We do have a few minutes left with Dr. Afghan. If you want to send your questions through, you're welcome to do that. You can text WhatsApp message through on 07440 420 432, and we'll try and put as many questions as we can to Dr. Afghan. Dr. Afghan, you there mentioned that actually you don't think that the issues might be long-lasting because the epidemic hopefully is short-lived. However, for children, for example, when they're continually informed that they need to hand wash, be careful, don't touch your face, etc. I mean, there probably are certain ages where children are more vulnerable to kind of remember what they've been taught and carry that out throughout their life. And it could be a repetitive thing and perhaps progress into OCD. Now, I have received a question, and the question is related. They've asked whether, Zainab has asked whether OCD can be detected earlier in children.
Yes, although this is a specialist area, which my experience is more in general adult psychiatry, but I have worked in child psychiatry as well. And in children, normally you see OCD symptoms in in their early teens or even earlier, and it's but the peak the most common age that they present is in the early adult life.
Right.
But we do see a proportion of young people, particularly children, presenting with OCD symptoms. And also I think you will be covering autism later on.
Yes.
There is a comorbidity or link of OCD symptoms with various other conditions. Sometimes OCD symptoms can also present. I mean, this is not for this is very not very often very common, but in people who are prone to develop psychosis, sometimes OCD can be a precursor or a premorbid or prodromal symptom that we say. But pure OCD symptoms can happen in young children, and they are managed in the same way, but more emphasis on psychological therapies like CBT.
So, what can parents do to kind of help support? I know you say you don't really work with children, but do you have any tips that you could provide, perhaps? Would it be similar to adults, keeping away from the media, providing support, distraction?
Yeah, I think the general principles are the same. With children, they should be encouraged to, obviously, in the COVID situation, they should follow the national guidance in terms of hygiene and cleanliness and hand washing, for example. But they should be encouraged to follow other positive distraction techniques and social interaction within the family. It's important to be accepting if they have to have a proper assessment and a diagnosis, and if they are diagnosed with OCD, then it is very important to accept the fact that this is something that it's a condition that they need support. So it has to be in an empathic manner, supporting the children with overcoming their compulsions or their obsession thoughts, but in a compassionate manner. As I said, trying to provide them more healthy, alternatives, so that they can fill their time. And a lot of young people do other things, like games, artwork, play, and all that sort of a thing, and that could help young people.
Yeah. Dr. Afghan, we have another question. We are moving, we're a couple of minutes away from the break, so let's try and answer it as quick as we can. This person has asked, during Ramadan, OCD symptoms with regards to prayer and washing can be further heightened. Now, with the added stress of COVID-19, how can we support people with their ability to practice their faith and stay well? I think we've covered a little bit of that earlier, but if you want to kind of recap.
So is it with particular reference to Ramadan?
Ramadan, yes, and OCD symptoms with regards to prayer.
So, yeah, I mean, because I think I've already covered this, but I think the same principles apply. That if the people are already diagnosed with OCD, they must ensure that they are. If they have got medication to take, even with during fasting period, then they should make sure that they're taking their medication.
Right.
If they have received previous CBT or they are currently in treatment, then they make sure that they are they are continuing with the principles that they've learned, or they are continuing with the therapy. Because Ramadan does not, what I understand, that it should not interfere with your treatment, and also with the COVID situation, we have already talked about that they should stick to the national guidance.
Thank you very much. And somebody's asked whether OCD is genetic. We don't really have time to answer that, but I don't think there's any clear-cut evidence to suggest that it is genetic. Now we're moving towards the ads. I'm thankful for your contributions. For further support or information, listeners can visit www.ocduk.org, speak to their GP or local IAPT teams. Thank you very much, Dr.
I'll just
Afghan.
very quickly mention that there is
couple of
a
seconds.
small proportion of genetics linked with OCD. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Dr. Afghan, for joining us on Ramadan Radio Wolverhampton and donating your DVDs. We pray that your charity work for mental health in Pakistan goes from strength to strength, Ameen. We're now moving towards the ad break. Thank you very much again, Dr. Safi Afghan.
Thank you, Atiyah. I'm really grateful.
Thank you. Thank you for coming along. You will hear me and my two guests on the other side talking about autism and caring for children with autism. So, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Radio Ramadan Wolverhampton, the mental health and wellbeing show with your host Atiyah. I have with me two guests who I will welcome later. Now, for this segment, we want to be talking about autism. Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disability and is lifelong. It affects communication and how a person relates to other people and the way they experience the world around them. Autism is a spectrum condition. That means difficulties can be from mild, moderate to severe. And although autistic people share certain difficulties, it will affect individuals in different ways. Some autistic people also have learning disabilities or other conditions, meaning that people will need different levels of support. Now, autism is more common than many people think. There are approximately 700,000 people with autism in the UK. That's more than 1 in 100. At least 1 in 3 adults with autism spectrum disorder, otherwise known as ASD, experience severe mental health problems. Now, 5 times as many males as females are diagnosed with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, although there is research to support that females are underdiagnosed and perhaps mask it well. Now, as parents and as mothers, we look after and care for our children. A carer is also a term used for those who look after someone who requires further support. A carer is anyone, including children and adults, who look after a family member, partner or friend, or who needs help because of their illness, frailty, disability, a mental health problem, or an addiction, and cannot cope without their support. The care they give is unpaid. Many carers don't see themselves as carers, and it takes them an average of 2 years to acknowledge their role as a carer. Now, our guests today will give insight, hopefully, to their role as carers, caring for a child with autism. Thank you very much for giving your time today, ladies. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show, Asifa, Malik and Nadia Rafi. Oh, excuse me, it would help if I... Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Thank you. Now, as a carer, your role is one that is necessary and very important. And I'm wondering, when you first became aware that your child had autism or was on the autism spectrum disorder, there may have been, I can imagine, some adjustments required. Can you share some of these experiences with us? Can we start with you, Asifa, if that's okay?
Yeah, that's fine. My son was 18 months old when he lost his speech. So he went from saying words in Punjabi and in English, and he just sort of went silent.
Right.
And it wasn't myself who noticed it. It was my older sister. So she was the one that pointed it out because she's a secondary school teacher. I did everything in my power to avoid the word autism.
Right.
So it was, he's got issues with his hearing. So I went to the audiologist and I was extremely adamant about them doing the hearing test.
Right.
And then I was like, right, okay, if it's not his hearing, it's just that he's got an older brother who's 11 months older than him and that he's just getting overshadowed. I didn't acknowledge fully his diagnosis of autism until he was 8 years old. So he was officially sort of diagnosed with global development delay at the age of 2. And he went into special needs sort of educational setting from that age. So he would go to an early years playgroup, and then he was going to a nursery. And so obviously his whole life he's been in a special needs setting. You have no idea what to do because you're not given a manual, you're not given any guidance in terms of how to deal with it as a parent. And like you said, you've become not just a parent, but you're their advocate. You're their lawyer, you're their human rights advocate, you're their sort of protector, you're their legal guardian, you're their legal aid, as it were. And you're guiding your child through this journey that you have absolutely no clue what's going on. You haven't got an idea of what's right, what's wrong. And you look around and you trust in the support of the services that you're getting.
Right.
For me, what I will say is that the services are out there. Their support is out there. However, you have to fight for it. It's not an easy journey. I was just saying to Nadia as well that I've been, since Zakaria was 8, I've been asking for support for him to help with getting him extra respite so he can have overnight stays, but also sort of support within the community so that my other children can get a break. So you were talking about young carers as well. So my oldest son, who's only 11 months older than Zakaria, he's a young carer.
Right.
And my youngest son, he's a young carer as well. And I think Nadia will sort of be able to sort of vouch for that experience as well, won't you?
Nadia, what are your experiences? Do you want to share yours? Thank you, Asifa.
Okay.
We'll come back.
My son's 8,
Right.
Isa. He was diagnosed at 4 years old. In terms of like making adjustments, like you were saying, you need to make adjustments. It's not an on and off switch. It's not something that's like, okay, he's got autism, so now we need to do this, this, and this. The process is long. So he went to a private nursery from the age of 2. They picked up on his lack of eye contact, his not responding to his name. He was really bright. He's really bright, mashallah. You know, classed as like a genius child because he could count to 100 and back. At the age of 2, knew his ABC backwards and forwards, and you just like, you know, like his attention just wasn't there. It's alhamdulillah, we've received really good support, and he's had at our school. He goes to a mainstream school because he's been diagnosed with Asperger's, so he's high functioning.
Right.
The school have been amazing, but like Aspa said, you've got to be on the ball. You've got to chase people to get the relevant support that's needed for your child.
Right.
Early years were brilliant with us.
Yeah.
Early years, special needs.
Yeah.
They were really good. They give advice to the school. The school have taken on that advice and are providing him with the support. But you're not given a manual.
No.
And you do have to, you're living it day to day. One day might be settled, the next day might be really, really stressful.
So Nadia, what kind of support was available for you? So it sounds like your son is younger. You said 8, and how old is your son?
Zachariah's 14.
Okay, and so your son is 8. I'm wondering what kind of support was available for you, and was it easy to find the support? Did you kind of, Asifa talked a little bit about denying or also almost perhaps ignoring even the fact, or trying to move away from the word autism?
I think there's so much stigma attached to that word and to the fact that it's a disability, that you do everything in your power as a parent, because the reality is my child has got autism and severe learning disabilities. It means that he's going to need lifelong care, and that he will never get married, he will never have a relationship, he will never have children, and up until the day myself and my husband pass away, we will be his carers, and thereafter it is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what happens to Zakaria. And that realization, even now for me, is very daunting. And because alhamdulillah I have my faith, that's what's got me through. So I don't know about how Nadia was, but every birthday I would sort of go, this is it, he's going to snap out of it. That's it. Zach's going to he's going to be like, Mom, I was faking.
To be honest, I've not had, I don't know, even before he had his diagnosis and when he did have his diagnosis, I was never like, okay, why has this happened to me? Why has it happened to us? You know, oh my God, what am I going to do? You do worry about the future.
Yeah.
I get with Isa, he hasn't got the learning disabilities to go with it. Alhamdulillah. So we've got, we're in a more
different situation.
It's different, and no autistic child is the same.
No.
Every autistic child is different.
Yes.
But it's about, for us, it's about giving him the tools that he needs when he's older, so that he can live as much of, in inverted commas, normal life, and get the relevant support that he needs. Growing up. For us at the minute, it's getting his EHCP because he hasn't got any EHCP.
Okay.
Which is?
An education healthcare plan.
Right. And who arranges that for you? Or helps you with that?
That's a lot of fun.
Thanks.
You're going to love it. It's through the council. They've got the government have put guidelines in there. And what you need to know is with COVID-19, they have suspended that. Right. So a lot of the sort of legal support that we have as parents of children with special needs has been suspended, and we don't know for how long. So they are sort of regularly giving us guidelines and stuff like that. And the reason I know this is because my eldest son, who sounds very similar to Isa, he's going to be 15, mashallah. We were in the process of getting an EHCP. So they have timelines. Wolverhampton Council, like every other council, are struggling with budgets and with funding because of the cuts across from central government. And it means that there's a massive delay. So, for example, with Zakaria, they changed it over to the EHCP, and they said, right, this is going to be the plan, this is the draft, and then we'll review it within a year. Absolutely fine. The year review came. I hadn't actually had a copy of the draft. Forget the finalised version. So the EHCP, yes, massively. It's a legal document. The legal document that sets out all the support that your child needs, all the diagnosis that's there for your child, and how the school can support and implement strategies to help your child. Without that, the school can't access the funding pot. So it's a bit of a vicious sort of cycle that you get into.
It's good that you've had an update. We haven't even had an update.
This was about 3 years, isn't it?
So you've had the update. Nadia, you're still waiting for the update.
We're kind of waiting to be given a decision. I think we had to put the application in ourselves just to speed it up.
Yeah.
The school Isa's not classed as like.
He's not classed.
He's not classed like there's other children that have got priority over him because he's coping in school. However, he's like suffering with anxiety now, because his transition into year 3 has been so difficult for him because the expectations much higher.
So what support's available for him then for that? Or for you as parents?
You should have support for mental health.
Yeah, well, on the back of like this application for the HCP, we went to. He had an appointment with a consultant paediatrician. They referred him to CAMS, who then then passed him on to Base 25, who gave him 6 sessions of counselling.
Base 25.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he's had 6 sessions of counselling. And then I thought, okay, needs more. So I had to kind of chase him up again and say, okay, he was just getting comfortable with the counsellor. He needs more counselling now to help with his anxiety. They put another application into CAMS for his to say that he could do with additional help. CAMS then said no.
Right. So CAMS is
community
children and adult mental health services.
Okay.
Yeah. They've said no to certain support, and then Base 25 went back to them and asked for more counselling, which they've agreed to again.
They have agreed.
Right.
Yeah,
so as parents, there's lots of toing and throwing from yourselves.
Yeah,
lots
definitely.
of, like as for saying, you're always the advocate and you're always fighting their corner. And
you're their voice.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm sort of like a stay-at-home mum, as it were. I've had to give up. I wanted to go back to university to become a speech and language therapist because my idea was, let's get into this system and let's just help not just families like mine, but also be a visual reminder for those families that there's somebody like us out there.
Right.
So, for example, when I went to speech and language therapy for Zakaria, I was told to just speak English with him. So as a result of that, my children are not bilingual and they cannot speak Punjabi, and I've lost a massive part of my heritage, of my culture, of my identity because of that. Whereas now the advice is speak whatever languages you can and just keep chatting to your children.
Right.
So, I mean, with CAMS as well, we had an extremely negative experience with them, and I appreciate that everybody's is very different, but you really have to be you're everything for them. My diary is chocker with meetings. I'm always at meetings with my social worker, with the schools, with sort of CAMS, with getting his EHCP in sort of order, and you know, making sure that we're getting the support there for our children. So the latest one was before COVID-19 with Stuart Anderson, our local MP, because they'd stopped the holiday and Saturday clubs. They'd just taken that provision away and not told us about it. And you've got families who were relying on that source of respite for their children. And this was last year before the summer holidays. And it was literally sort of like the day before we get a phone call from the service provider saying, the council aren't doing it. So I spoke to my social worker. I said,
so the social worker, we've had a question in here from one of our listeners asking whether social workers are involved in with regard to respite and young carers assessment, and you said you got in touch with the social workers, so they're key.
I have a social worker, and that was another battle in itself. The first social worker that I had was as useful as a chocolate teapot for me. She was it was awful. There was a lot of sort of preconceived ideas. There was a lot of stereotypes. A lot of, I don't know if you've had this experience, Nadia. I've always been asked, can you extended family not help?
Right.
And I got really angry in one of the meetings, and I basically just asked, I said, do you ask your white families the same question? Is there an assumption that because I'm a Pakistani Muslim woman that I have got, alhamdulillah, all my family around me, that's a separate side issue. However, they all have their own lives.
Right.
My mum doesn't want to come and look after my child.
So it sounds like there's a certain level of resilience, understanding and strength required, Asifa, and you've had a lot of difficulties there with some of the services, and I'm sorry to hear that. Nadia, are your experiences similar?
No, they're not.
I'm so glad. That's good.
Yeah.
So we've not been involved with social services. We haven't got a social worker. Maybe that's because Isa hasn't got the additional learning difficulties. We've never accessed respite either. Although it does kind of sound like something that would be useful.
Oh, it's amazing.
Because ultimately it's me and my husband who do support one another. When I've kind of had enough, then he will take over.
Yeah.
And alhamdulillah, we've got extended family as well who we do turn to. But
it sounds like respite would be an idea as well. So
it's not for our sake; it's for Isa, for him to experience other things as well, and to kind of
that was our thought process as well, because that was something like sort of the community support that's available. I can't go swimming with Zakaria as much as I want to. I can't. I'm not even going to battle trying to get him into a pair of swimming trunks. So he has two. He's classed as needing 2 support workers at all times.
Okay.
So he's classed as 2 to 1, whereas it's just me and him at home. So for us, yes, it was about giving him those experiences that we can't always give. And, with my husband working and things like that. And at that point, I was trying to sort of go back to university. We were trying to find that balance where it wasn't relying on, let's say, family or even my other 2 children. And for us, respite really, and this sounds like the daftest thing, obviously it's all shut now with COVID-19. Before COVID-19, when Zakaria used to get an overnight stay, we literally sort of would go out, find a place to eat that didn't involve fried chicken, because that's all Zakaria eats, right? Okay. And there's certain places we can't drive past. There's certain places that, there's different routes that we have to take. And it was literally going, okay, where are we going to go eat?
Lost.
That was it. And it's just sitting at home, being able to watch a film with my other 2 children without having Zakaria stimming so loudly that he sort of physically and sort of verbally, where he can move the sofa. And that's with me, like a massive chunk sitting on it as well. So I was just saying to Nadia, my son's mashallah, almost 6 foot tall.
Yeah, mashallah.
And he's massive. And
so there's different things to consider then when
puberty is an eye-opener. And I know this is just sort of giving them an overview of what autism is like. And like Nadia said, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person. My son is not Rain Man. He's not a savant. He's not got any sort of discernible skill that's going to make me any type of money. I've checked. There's nothing there. He's not a money maker. But what he is an absolutely amazing, unique beautiful. He's absolutely stunning, and I'm totally biased, but if you see his pictures, you'll say the same. What he's done is reminded me that I plan and Allah plans, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of plans, because that child is my ticket to Jannat al-Firdaus, and I'm holding on to his coattails, and inshallah, you know, Allah will accept that from us. But it's, for me, the biggest thing is that realization that this life's nothing, and the support's out there. Fight for the support, but be open and honest, and do not be afraid to say, I've got a child that has this disability, and do not be afraid to say, I say a lot of the times when I'm not feeling mentally strong, and I put my hand up and I wave my little flag and I say, I'm not well.
Yeah, and that's important, recognising your own needs. We'll come on to that in a minute. So the difficulty and struggle that you've had, at the same time you're able to kind of balance out and find the positivities in looking after your son and being a carer for your son. Nadia, you've mentioned that with regards to your caring role, you've been able to connect with more support, more positive type of support, where you feel as though things are moving forward, although you're still waiting for that care plan.
The EHCP has been that's kind of the area where we are kind of struggling at the minute. Because he's high functioning, it's hard to prove that he's got them additional needs, and his anxiety is affecting him because he's getting the grades. You know, and I was somebody said to me, it's like, well, if you're expecting him to get greater depth, there are other kids who are like working towards, and all of them should need additional help, then is that what you say? I'm like, well, no, because they're not going through the same anxiety as my son's going.
Yeah, it's not understanding the mental health aspect of something like Asperger's. So with autism, it's such a, like Atiyah said, it's such a massive spectrum. It's such a broad ranging characteristics, and it presents in so many different ways. And for me, mental health is often downplayed, especially in children. Completely. And we have to realise that our children now that are going through this school system, they're under an immense amount of pressure, and they've got challenges that we didn't have to face. We didn't have social media. So I said to Nadia as well, my eldest son, who's going to be 15, he sounds exactly like Isa, and he's stumbled and struggled through. And it's only because now we're at a school where the Senko lead is absolutely amazing. You cannot lift your foot off the pedal, and it's making sure that they're aware of the impact it has on the child's mental health, because he's in a situation where he can see all his peers getting along and doing these things, and that internal struggle that they, at such a young age, like 8, sometimes they can't sort of voice that. You know, alhamdulillah, my son's old enough to be able to say to me, Mum, I'm feeling a bit this, or I'm feeling a bit that, and we have those conversations.
With Isa's been, in September, October, he was waking up crying. You know, kind of, oh, Mummy, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this means. I don't know what that means. Oh, it's too hard. Mummy, can you speak to my teacher? Mummy, can you do this? And it is, it's just, it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
And at 8, it shouldn't be like that. And I think for me, the blessing with Zakaria having the learning disability is that he's not aware that he's autistic. He doesn't know that he's got a disability. He doesn't feel it. Whereas my eldest is extremely sort of aware of being different to other people. But the way I say to him is that, like, mate, you've got your strength, and you've got your uniqueness, and you're amazing in your own way. And as much as I want to put all these things where I want all these extra bits and pieces for him, I realised I accept him for who he is. And it's just, you got to support and nurture that for them.
Thank you for your contributions. Now, we are nearing the end of the show, and it's happened quite quickly, actually, and it's very interesting with all of this discussion and what you're sharing. We've actually had a social worker messaging into the show and saying they ask everyone the question in terms of family networks. Everyone is asked this question, so I suppose I just want to let you know that.
I think the thing is, I appreciate that, and I think what you also need to know is that when you're in that situation yourself, you literally feel like you're there with a begging bowl. And I think for me, I've had questions about whether he goes to the masjid or whether he goes to, you know, sort of pray and stuff like that, and I just don't see how that's relevant to his present, you know, sort of his difficulties. But I do use it as a platform to sort of just give them a bit more information about how Islam views disabilities. But I mean, you have to realise that not every social worker is going to be the same.
And there's other messages coming in, and I'm going to read through this as well. Mashallah, sisters, you're doing a great job with your children. My heart and love goes out, and du'as, lots of du'as go out to you both. May Allah alleviate your anxieties and ease your journeys through the life with your children. And my love goes out to you both. That's lovely. A question for you both. How do you both manage with other children and ensuring giving children the attention at the same time? Now, this question would have to be answered very quickly, and I'm imagining it's actually it requires a lot of attention and focus, but we are nearing the end of the show.
With Isa, everything mainly revolves around him. I've got 2 children that are younger than him. We've explained to them that Isa's different, and they need to be patient with him, and they need to look after him. So, you know, they have got little carers roles. So it's
Thank you.
you know, they grow their own understanding as they're growing up and trying.
So you're talking to them and you're sharing,
Absolutely.
and it's like it's a shared journey then for the whole family. It sounds like.
Is.
Quickly, before we finish, would you be able to tell me how you look after yourselves in this process? Wow. So that reaction.
I take time out. I'll go out for like an hour or two. My husband will, you know, kind of look after the kids. Alhamdulillah, I'm fortunate that, you know, I've got such a supportive husband, and we, you know, are in this journey together.
I think for me, it's chocolate and baking. I bake.
Excellent tips there,
Alpha
Gil.
bakes cakes if you want your cakes.
If you're interested in hearing further from these ladies, please do get in touch and we can get some more carers on the show and get different points of view. Thank you, Asifa and Nadia, for sharing your very different experiences of caring with us. It seems like it might be helpful for carers to have some space to come together and be amongst like-minded folk, perhaps starting a Muslim carers group within Wolverhampton. There's food for thought for you too. We were talking about chocolate earlier. Now, for listeners, if you want further support, you can get in touch with your GPs or go on to the website www.autism.org.uk, and there's also one for carers, www.carers.uk.com.